I had the opportunity to go to Honduras last April, and the campesinos were standing on the street, and the government forces on the other side. And the chant that this campesino had was so beautiful because they say, "Nos tienen miedo porque no tenemos miedo." They fear us because we're not afraid. And so one of the things that I have seen this, let's put it this way, since we knew that NATO was going to happen, and GA especially, and is that there is a fear on them. They are fearful, not us. We're just nonviolent demonstrators who are going to be saying what we need to say. But one element that I am interested in not just doing is just marching, and that's the end. We need to continue the conversation, church by church, block by block, union by union, school by school, PTA by PTA, whatever. I think that we need to continue making sure that we are applying this new phenomena of more organic, more grassroots voices who have not been able to. I'm sorry, I'm getting too full. So apologize.
All right. So while I think the kind of mutual aid, free breakfast programs, and kind of the different community outreach that was done by the Panthers in the late '60s and by a lot of different groups, I think it came as like as both a product and helping to produce like a movement. But if you look at the history of like the civil rights movement and then the Black Power movement and kind of other national liberation struggles, and as well as the anti-war movement and all of that together, you realize that the conditions that allowed for the creation of like a free breakfast program, it wasn't just the poverty, but it was that there were so many activists and so many people who were involved in the first place to help keep that program going. And in my perspective, I feel like where our movement is right now, and there are different movements within this, but where we are right now, and what Occupy, this is a very opening chapter of a new struggle and a new kind of coming up. But we're not, to me, in my perspective, we don't have enough cadre, we don't have enough soldiers, we don't have enough people to make these types of community programs work effectively. And so my challenge is that where do you, like for me, it's like getting involved in the labor movement and the mass movement, where we can kind of connect with people. Like to me, it's like the first step. And then there's the kind of like mutual aid of really digging into communities that really makes it so that people really can see the need for revolution.
Well, I think you're raising a very good point, because I think to figure out what to do, you have to sort of have an analysis, about what is going on. And in the 60s, there were national liberation movements happening around the world. There was the Cold War that was going on. There was a very clear understanding of that communism or socialism was an alternative system. There was more explicit political concepts being put out there, anti-imperialism, revolution, things like that. And, it is very different now. I mean, I think we've got the environment movement, we've got the whole global aspect of what's going on. We have demonstrators and the Occupy movement going on around the world. We had an economic crisis, global. So there's different ideas that are in people's minds right now, and so where we're going to hook people and get them engaged is going to be different, So the regular guy on the street now knows about the economic crisis and is probably thinking more about, what is the economic system? Why? That's why I was interested in coming to this workshop, Democratic Capitalism, or whatever the title is of this workshop, because, I think here we are in we live in capitalistic society, and yet we see the inequality. So what does that mean? Why do we have such inequality under capitalism, I think is something that everybody is thinking about now because it's happening. So that's, I think, what activists need to, use what's out there in our times right now and try to get people engaged in that conversation.
Yeah,
I'm going to just leave off hopefully a short statement. Although things are different now, we have different ideas, we have less of a cohesive coalition structure than we did in the 60s. I do still see a lot of this stuff still being possible. A couple weeks ago, the mental health movement held a free mental health clinic in front of Rob's house. I mean, that's, I think, very much public education. They provided a service, but it wasn't for the sake of providing the service. It highlighted the need. We needed these 12 mental health clinics. And they did it in front of the mayor's house to say, hey, we're here, we're not going away. And I think these things can still happen. In Bridgeport, where I live, there's a place called the Benton House. There's like 9 people there, and they have less than $100,000 a year, which is comparable to an occupied budget for a given city. They feed thousands of people every month. They have 150 kids in their education programs. We can do this stuff with very little resources, very little people. 9 people, less than $100,000 a year. So these things can be done. That's all I want to say is that it may be different, but it is still possible.
Yeah, and that's the and I mean, I want to thank you again for participating. One of the problems, if you think about that dichotomy, I mean, what happens oftentimes again, where the social change through electoral politics or through direct action, if we really think about it implicitly, what happens is if that social change doesn't occur, who gets blamed for that social change not occurring? The people, because they didn't do what? They didn't vote enough, or they didn't put enough pressure on the politicians, or the people because they didn't go out to a march, because they didn't come out on the streets, because they didn't occupy something. So those kinds of strategies of social change implicitly blame the people oftentimes for social change not occurring. And what was going on, I think what you're talking about and what the Panthers were talking about was what is our relationship to the people. That's why he said a lot of people think they're better than the people, right? A lot of people think they're better than they think because maybe they know they've read a few more books or they know a little bit more about the history. So it's about what is our relationship. Are we going to come humbly and do this work? How are you going to relate to people? Are you trying to shock them into action? Are you trying to tell them what to do? Or are you going to come humbly and work among them and meet the very many urgent needs that we have in our city? Thank you for participating. We really appreciate it.